Good morning and welcome to the VUU. Happy New Year to you. So glad that you could join us, and so glad that we have the folks joining us here on the VUU, including one of our old regulars. I'm not saying you're old, Tom, but Tom Shade, Reverend Tom Shade. Very glad to have you here. So what's going on in y'all's neck of the woods? I'm here in Austin, and it's just kind of dreary outside, but our Texas legislature is about to come back in session. They only do this, we only let them do this every other year, and it's just for like 6 months, but boy, they are geared up and ready to go. What's going on where you are?
Well, I'm in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. This is where I moved since the last time I was on the VUU with you all. And it's a beautiful sunny day here. All of New England had a big snowstorm last couple of days, but Rhode Island was spared. And as it often is with the big blizzards that hit Boston and other places. But good weather here. I've been I'm retired, and I'm even retired from the VUU, which is what I did after I retired. And so I'm glad to be back and visit you guys again. So great.
So what all have you been doing, Tom?
Just well, I've been writing and guest preaching, and a lot of time went into selling and buying a house, and getting a new house fixed up, and my wife has left full-time work and has gone into business for herself, and I'm helping her with that, setting up an LLC and getting accounting and all that other kind of stuff going. So, that's been it. I'm also living a lot closer to my grandchildren now, so a certain amount of, overhead for, hanging out with children is going on to us.
I have seen some pretty adorable pictures on Facebook. Not so dignified anymore, are you?
Well, I never was big on the dignity thing, but it does prove that evolution is working, because our children are better looking than us, and our grandchildren are even better looking than them. So it does mean that the species is rising. That's my proof for evolution. So
I hear you. Reverend Hank Peirce, glad you can join us. What's going on where you are?
Hey, it looks like I'm in like a police detention room, but I'm not. No, I'm at Tufts. I was at the gym this morning, and I looked at my watch and I went, I don't have enough time to get home. So I thought, I'll go to Tufts, which is up right up the street from where we live. I'm in the basement in one of these study rooms, and it's super echoey in here. I didn't realize how echoey it was until I started talking. I might move, because there's nobody else here. Anyway, maybe that's what I'll do. I'll walk around and show you the Universalist library here in the basement of Tisch library at Tufts. Anyway, I'm doing fine. The hot stove season has officially begun. The search process, which from December 1st until January 2nd, churches have put up their information to allow ministerial candidates to look at their records. And on January 2nd, those churches were able to click to see who and if and who anybody is interested in becoming their minister, and they're presently, I'm sure, contacting people and doing all that fun and important stuff. So it has begun another season of the Hot Stove Report, starting to happen already, and I'm already starting to come up with theories and trying to figure out who's going where and all that sort of stuff, and trying to figure out how to pronounce people's names.
Right. Are there particular hot pulpits open this year?
East Shore up in Seattle, of course. Well, Aisha's not here. I wasn't just trying to butter her up, but that's certainly that's a really wonderful congregation. The Providence congregation. There are some really wonderful places. I actually thought that more churches in Canada would get more hits this year,
right
after the election. But actually, it does seem like a few more hits than the usual. So that's kind of funny. I think there are 3 congregations in Canada who are open, and one in a very cold area, but a really lovely church in Winnipeg. Is it Winnipeg? I don't know. It's where Stefan Johansson was. And it's cold up there. It's all I know.
Providence is open.
Yes, exactly.
And Providence is the new Maine. It's where a lot of UU ministers are retiring. So
that's right.
If you want to go someplace where there'd be a whole pew full of elder advisors, right?
But you'd have to deal with those pesky UU ministers. So
exactly right. Yeah, as long as they bring their grandkids to Sunday school, that's okay.
Several other good ones.
And joining us, she is usually behind the chalice, but she has come out today. Thank you very much. Terri Burnor, what's going on where you are?
Hi, Joanna. So I'm here in frigid cold St. Paul, Minnesota. Meg is also here in the Twin Cities. And so we are enjoying the bitter, -5 with a -25 wind chill, but it's gorgeous, blue sky, sunshine, and I am excited to be here.
Glad to have you, and very glad to have our guest, Katia Hansen. She is president and CEO of UURISE, and she's going to be telling us more about that in just a few minutes. But first of all, Katia, where are you, and how's it going there?
Well, good morning. I am here in Oceanside, California, which is in San Diego County. We're just north of San Diego. We are a balmy 54 degrees, which, for those of us in California is pretty cold. But I grew up in the Twin Cities area where Terri is right now, so I can manage this. I'm a congregant at Palomar UU Fellowship in Vista, and also, as you said, the president and CEO of UURISE, and so I'm really excited to be here today.
Well, and before we get to UURISE, so you're in California. I'm in Tech Hope, is it sounds like California is being really clear that they are going to fight against Trumpism. They are going to fight against some of the changes that are being proposed. What's it like being there?
Well, I tell you what, it's been really, I would say, inspiring, because it's one thing to have the resistance come from the people, which of course is incredibly important. But when the governor of your state is standing up and saying, yeah, we're not going to put up with this, and we're going to do some amazing things. We're going to bring in a new attorney general who's definitely going to stand up to this. My understanding is they're looking at bringing Eric Holder in as special counsel for some other things. I don't know if that's rumor or solidified yet, but our government in California is definitely being very clear that, yeah, we're not gonna fold, and we're not gonna agree to, as you said, kind of that Trumpism and Trumpish behavior. We're not going to allow our people to just be bullied and treated poorly. And so they definitely are looking at, there's some values acts and things like this that they're looking at to codify and really solidify protections for people, and recognition that how we are as people is a moral issue, and that's something that our government wants to lead with, is how to have a moral budget, how to have a moral state in which we treat everyone the way that they should be treated.
Yeah, and speaking of resistance to all of y'all, what did you think of that this week, where we saw, I think, kind of the first big successful act of resistance around, they were going to try and gut the ethics, the office of what is it, the Office of Congregational Ethics, and people reacted, and so they had to change. What do y'all think about that?
Well, I think it's interesting because there's a little glimmer of daylight between the Republicans on Capitol Hill and his golden glorious leader in Trump Tower. That there's a little glimmer of daylight between them, and how can we? It makes you think that perhaps it's possible to drive a wedge between the two of them, the Republicans in Congress, who are, right-wing ideologues and Trump, who is, politically a narcissist, basically. I sometimes think that what we ought to do is just compliment him a lot, because he seems to like people who like him a lot, and he's easily influenced by flattery. As someone who has that same problem, I kind of understand that.
Can I say that I find it really weird. It seems like he has no friends. It seems like, I mean, not Tom. I mean, I'm talking about Donald Trump.
Thank you. I was thinking, I thought you were one of my friends, Hank, but go ahead.
That he surrounds himself with his family, and then people who will compliment him. I know this is a church thing, but it's very interesting observation. I keep going for it, like to hear about like his vacation with his pals, but it's always like the people he goes on vacation with tend to be like either people who work for him or can make him money. So it was like, well, this is interesting, Anyway, so just a little observation.
Yeah.
Well, they say that one of the strongest predictors of success for ministers is their ability to form collegial relationships, and that the minister who is isolated and has no friends is one who's headed for trouble.
Right. Well, and you need you need the friends who will buck you up when you need it, but who will also take you down when you need it.
There's a great importance to having those people who are willing to be the mirror, right? To hold it up and say, did you take a look at what you look like there?
Right.
Yeah.
So, Katia, tell us, for those who don't know, first, can you give kind of the overview of what is UURISE? And it is, even though it is spelled UURISE, it is UURISE. Tell us about that.
So UURISE is a nonprofit organization that was started in 2007. We are a 501c3, and we do direct practice legal services on immigration law, as well as a lot of community organizing, education and outreach, and organizing and supporting UU congregations throughout the United States, particularly related to immigration. So UURISE is Unitarian Universalist Refugee and Immigrant Services and Education. We are an empowerment-based organization, meaning we work in partnership with all of our clients. We don't treat them as traditional clients in that we are the experts and they are the ones who are lucky enough to get our information. And because of that, we chose the name UURISE because we like to help you rise. We like to help people achieve their own potential when it comes to their immigration cases. That we feel the only way that they can be truly successful is if they're an active participant in their own case, which means that they get to make a lot of the decisions. We kind of lay out the options and help them understand, kind of the legal issues, but then we let them lead how their case goes. So in office, we do direct practice legal services. We assist people with everything from naturalization to sponsoring a family member. We specialize in working with marginalized immigrants, which would be immigrant victims of domestic violence, immigrant victims of other crimes, victims of human trafficking, people who are seeking asylum in the United States are some of the examples. And then we do a lot of free workshops in the community. We do naturalization, and previously we've done DACA workshops as well, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which is providing free legal services in the community to those who would be least able to access either nonprofit services that we offer in office or private attorney services. On the larger scale, what we do with UUs nationwide is we assist individuals, small group ministries, and congregations that are interested in immigrant justice and immigrant rights work. Right now, one of our biggest pushes is sanctuary, and I know we'll be talking about that some today. But we also have been doing a lot with safety planning, which is helping avoid catastrophic loss in the event of a detention or deportation. So we work with families to create an empowered plan of what to do in the event that a family member is detained or deported. And this is something that congregations then are able to take and work and do this work with immigrants throughout the United States. And we do a lot also with connecting congregations and, again, individuals and small group ministries with refugee resettlement, with naturalization workshops, with different ways of being involved. UUs don't have a national UU immigration organization like a National Catholic Charities or something like this that's funded by the denomination. So UURISE is, stepping in and doing as much as we can there to make sure that we are providing supports to congregations, even if we're not directly providing all of the services. We're making sure that congregations know what work is being done in their areas, how we can connect them to those areas, and making sure that UUs are doing what we do best, which is walking our talk, walking our walk, and making sure that we are boots on the ground, but making sure that we are looking on the ground before we land, so we're not boots on somebody else's back, right? So really trying to work with how to be intentional in partnering, having covenantal partnerships, and working with immigrant-led organizations. And so it takes a little bit of organizing to do that, and that's what UURISE is really good at, is connecting.
So what exactly is sanctuary? When you hear like that a church is offering sanctuary, I think that a lot of people, until they know more about this, they kind of imagine something very secretive, kind of Underground Railroad, right? What is it?
Well, wonderful question. That is actually part of it, would be something related to the Underground Railroad. Something I do want to say first is just making sure that we're clarifying there's a difference between sanctuary cities, which we're hearing a lot about right now, and actually providing physical sanctuary. So physical sanctuary is a faith community response to injustice in immigration law. And it goes back centuries, and it used to have, its roots are in protecting anyone who was wanted by the law. Even someone who actually had been convicted of committing a crime, they could claim sanctuary in a faith community so that they were protected. And there's a long-standing tradition of law enforcement not entering faith communities to arrest someone or take them. When we talk about sanctuary in the United States, we generally are talking about what started kind of in the 1980s with a bunch of Central Americans who had come to the United States and who were in need of protection. They were seeking asylum, seeking protections, and the U.S. government was saying, "Oh, nope, we're done. We just need to send them back." But the faith community said, "Wait a minute! If we're sending these people back, we're sending them back to their deaths, right? That the murder rates are so high that there's retaliation for those people who have tried to leave." And we know that this is a problem. So different congregations stood up and said, our laws tell us that we shouldn't be sending people back, whether that's through the Convention Against Torture, the Geneva Convention, the different legal foundations that we have that say if someone is seeking asylum, we need to listen to that and offer protection as needed. So a number of churches stepped up and said, wait a minute, if you're not going to take care of this, then we are going to provide a safe place for these people to be. And in the 1980s, a lot of that was just for a couple of weeks. It was a safe place for people to be. Some was done even as kind of an Underground Railroad if they were not in a safe place, getting them to a safe place until these people could reunite with families. Moving forward, the new sanctuary movement kind of revived starting around 2007, 2008, when we saw more and more deportations starting, and for people that have been living in the United States for years and years and years, and people, again, now coming from Central America because of the crisis. So sanctuary now, in the new sanctuary movement, is a little bit different, but it is providing a safe refuge within a faith community. It generally, although not always, but it generally is very public because we're trying to win in the court of public opinion. So instead of being kind of secretive and hidden, We're being very upfront about it. It's not about harboring. It's about saying to the US government, this person has a final order of deportation, but we believe that you should relook at this case because we think that this person should be allowed to stay in the United States for a number of reasons. And we're going to give you that opportunity to relook at that while we provide a safe place for this person to stay.
So the goal is basically to create space and time for further, for a review of the person's deportation or, immigrant status by the government.
Right.
So I belonged for a while to the Ann Arbor Church, the Ann Arbor congregation in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And in the 80s, they started a sanctuary relationship with a family from El Salvador. And they lived in the church for years. And they still have a relationship with that family, who eventually became able to stay under some legal status. I'm unclear about exactly what that was, how all that worked, but they lived in the church for years, which is kind of what I was thinking. That's how, to me, I defined sanctuary. So when you're saying that it's aimed at a much more temporary, space creating, time creating period of time, is interesting to me. That's not what that was happening there. Yeah.
Well, and it's definitely changed from the 80s to what we now refer to as the new sanctuary movement. Those people that are going into sanctuary that we've seen in sanctuary in the last few years, although we still have some cases that only are lasting a few weeks or a few months, we're having more and more cases that are lasting closer to a year, 9 months, 16 months, sort of things like this. I'm not familiar with the case in Ann Arbor, so I don't know whether it was a full sanctuary case, meaning they were unable to leave the church during that time, and so they couldn't, go do their own grocery shopping, they couldn't go to work, they couldn't do anything like that, or if it was a situation where because of their legal issues, it was safer for them to kind of home base out of the congregation. Like I said, I'm not familiar with that case, so I wouldn't want to comment on that. But one of the hallmarks of sanctuary as part of the new sanctuary movement is that when someone goes into sanctuary, they are basically going to be staying in that faith community for the entire time. They can't leave to go grocery shopping. They can't leave to go to work. They can't leave to go to school. They can't leave to go to a doctor's appointment, and so there's a lot of logistics that go into it, and there's a lot of need for an organized leadership team to kind of help figure out how all of that works. That's done, again, in concert with and in partnership with the person who's in sanctuary, because it's their case and they need to be leading it. And then also in partnership with immigrant-led organizations and ideally sanctuary coalitions in the area. Because you have to make decisions on everything from if there is a medical emergency, like does the person at the congregation make the decision to call the ambulance, or do we wait to determine whether the person in sanctuary is okay with that? Who determines and assesses the risk? Which I realized that was just a really big example of something that we're kind of just getting in there. So I don't want to scare anybody off with that big example. But I do just want to acknowledge that sanctuary is kind of like a house arrest or immigrant detention, but instead of being in a detention center, they actually are in house arrest at the congregation.
Yeah, it's we saw that here in Austin. It's very wearing on the family that's doing it. Do you have any idea about how successful this is?
Sanctuary has been actually incredibly successful. I want to say in the last, since 2007, we've had roughly 18 cases, I believe. And of those, I believe 16 have been successfully won. And then there's 2 that are currently still in sanctuary and in process right now. Part of the reason why they've been so successful is because there's a small number of them. And so in order to determine who goes into sanctuary and how that happens, you're working with a legal team. And the attorneys have felt that there is a realistic opportunity to win this case. It's not a situation where just anyone who wants sanctuary can have that, because if you can't win the case, then you have a person who's either in kind of permanent detention at your faith community, or the person is there for a certain amount of time and then they're still going to end up, being returned to their home country. So, so there's a lot of working parts that go into it. So that's part of the reason why we have been so successful, is because the cases that have been identified for sanctuary are cases that we believe are winnable cases.
In Texas, one of the things that we are seeing is that where churches are still doing sanctuary, but there's also the thing of simply going to the court with someone. And it seems to make a real difference when you have a bunch of American citizens, probably not of the race of the person who is at risk of being deported. Are you seeing this in other parts of the country?
We are, and that's a big part of actually what we've been talking about, because not every congregation can provide physical sanctuary. So we're really trying to flesh out the different ways that people can be involved in sanctuary support, which would be partnering with those congregations, doing interfaith work, partnering with congregations and faith communities that are providing sanctuary, but also being a sanctuary advocate, which is everything from working with your city council to try and make sure that the policies and regulations in your city take into consideration immigrant families and what that means, which could be anything from what are the regulations to owning a small business? Can you sell tamales out of your home? Or do you, have to have a business license? And is that business license available in multiple languages, right? Doing that type of advocacy work, or doing the more direct advocacy work of going to court, going to immigration court and providing direct support and saying, this person is a member of our community and we do not want to see this person removed. And, we would like you to see that this person has support. They're a part of our community and we really want them to be, we really want you to consider that when you're looking at their entire immigration case. Look at the whole person.
And I see that Reverend Meg Riley has joined us. Welcome back in, Meg. Yeah, Hank, what you got?
Well, I'm just wondering sort of how difficult it is for you all dealing with all these different states' rules. I'm sure there's the national laws, but I was just thinking could this person go outside of the church as long as it was on church land? And, I'm just sort of thinking of all the churches that I've served and, can they be outside as long as they're on the front lawn or, all that sort of stuff. How difficult is it for you to have to navigate how different states react to this and deal with this?
Well, the good news is that immigration law is federal law. So the vast majority of the rules and regulations that we're working with are federal. That doesn't mean that how they're implemented is the same in every state, but at least the basis of the laws and regulations are federal. Where it gets to be interesting state by state is, the response to the neighbors. If you have a lot of NIMBYs, the not in my backyard sort of people, whether the neighbors want to question the church or challenge whether or not their zoning allows it. There's also differences of what type of insurance each congregation holds and whether their insurance covers that or whether we need to look at getting a rider or changing insurance companies. Of course, there's also the issue of, again, the legal team and whether or not there is sufficient support for legal teams in the areas to do that work. Because of that, UURISE actually has created a discernment process that we work with congregations to go through to help them make that decision. There's a wonderful toolkit that was created by the new sanctuary movement that is designed to help congregations become sanctuary congregations. And that's great, except for it's definitely written for clergy-led congregations. So one of the things that UURISE is doing, with great thanks to a grant from the UU funding panel, or the UU funding program, we are actually rewriting that toolkit from a UU point of view, from a congregation-led. How does a congregation make that decision? So it's not just a minister coming in and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to live our values, but really, how does the congregation go through the process of making the decision? And as a part of that discernment process, it walks you through things like, what are your obligations to your other renters? Do you have a child care center on campus? What are the state's laws on your child care center on who can be around and who can't be around, who has to be fingerprinted, who doesn't? Just making sure that there's actually consensus in the congregation, and not just a simple majority, because sanctuary is not the sort of thing that will be successful with a simple majority. If 51% think it's fine or great and 49% think it's not good or horrible, that's really problematic, and it's really not fair to bring in a person whose life is already in great turmoil and disruption, to put them in a situation where there's conflict over them going on.
Yeah. So being a sanctuary church, is that illegal? What are there consequences that churches might face? So
it's a very common question, and it's one of those questions that there's never a straight answer for. So, more apologies here as I start my tap dance. Allison Harrington is the minister at Southside Presbyterian in Tucson, and she loves to say that there are as many ways to interpret the law as there are to interpret Scripture, and that so her stance on it is very clear that it's not against the law, because the way that we interpret the law is that it's not. That's definitely one way to approach it. Another way to approach it is that it is an act of peaceful civil disobedience, that the person that we're taking into sanctuary has a final order of deportation, but we disagree and we think that this is unjust. And as a faith community, our faith tells us to rise up and resist and provide protection for this person, and give the government an opportunity to relook at and rework the case. I also have heard the Quakers are using a new term that they're talking about. They approach it from the point of civil initiative, which is they're giving the government the space to do what they were supposed to be doing already. But because the government hasn't been doing it, they're going to do it on the government's behalf. They're going to provide protection for this person on the government's behalf. So all of that was a lot of tap dance to answer the question of, is it illegal? What is illegal is harboring what's considered an alien, harboring an illegal alien. And that's the legal terminology. Most sanctuary cases are very public. We announce them, we do press conferences, we have candlelight vigils. We get the information out there because we are trying to win in the court of public opinion. To harbor someone, that is secreting them away and hiding them, and hiding them from someone, as opposed to saying, oh no, this person is here. We're not hiding the fact that we're here. We're just saying that you need an opportunity to relook at this case because we disagree with the way that you're doing this. We feel that this is a form of injustice. So historically, that's been the approach, is that it does not meet the qualifications of harboring. But the caveat to that is there's no guarantee. The churches have not, in the new sanctuary movement, have not had any legal issues, but there's no guarantee that there never will be. One of the questions that we also get kind of very similar to that is, could we lose our nonprofit status? And generally my response to that is always, there's certain things that you have to do to maintain your nonprofit status. There's legal filings that you have to do. And you also have to refrain from partisan political acts. And again, our approach is that this is not a political act. This is not a partisan act. This is actually how we express our faith. Our faith teaches us to honor the inherent worth and dignity of all people. It teaches us to step up and resist when we see injustice, and to be the helpers and to be the people that are making change. And so this is an expression of our faith.
So speaking of politics, how do you imagine UURISE's role changing in the next presidential administration?
Oh my goodness. If it's anything like how it's changed just since November 9th, it's going to be a crazy 4 years. It's going to be very interesting to see rhetoric leading up to the election manifests in actual policies and actual laws. We have heard, very consistently from the transition team and from key Republicans in Washington, D.C., that we should expect that as of January 21st, that DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, that DACA and the other executive actions related to that will go away. That's kind of what we're expecting. And yet, just a few weeks ago, I believe it was a 60 Minutes interview, President-elect, made comments that, oh, well, we're going to, we want to take care of the criminal issue first, and then we're going to take care of the wall, and then we're going to do this, and then we're going to figure out how to deal with, those wonderful people who were here through no fault of their own, sort of thing. Well, if you're talking about doing that sequentially, then we're probably looking at 12 years out before we actually deal with the DACA situation. But that's adding logic to a situation that I'm not sure logic was ever used to get to that situation. Sorry, but so we don't really know what's going to change, but we do know that it's not going to. We do feel very confident that we're not going to have the protections that we have had, and we're not going to have the type of relationship that we have had working with the administration. We have every expectation that it will not be a friendly administration.
So Katia, what about these calls that have been coming out for President Obama to pardon all of the undocumented immigrants? Is that a realistic strategy? Will that actually do anything? Is that something that we should take seriously?
I've heard those calls, and it's an interesting thing. I am not, although I'm interested in constitutional law, I am not a constitutional law scholar. My understanding of pardon is that someone actually has to have been convicted of something before they can be pardoned of it. But I don't know how that would work. The work that he was doing with DACA in creating DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and then trying to expand that to create what we referred to as DACA 2.0, which eliminated the upper age cap, and then also added DAPA, which is Deferred Action for Parents of American Citizens and Lawful Permanent Residents. That was what the Supreme Court had a tie on last year while we were at General Assembly. Those expansions were probably the best thing that could have been done to make that happen if he didn't, go through Congress and get something passed. I'm not sure of how or if it would work to pardon people that don't actually have a criminal conviction. I'm not sure that couldn't just as easily be overturned on January 21st, but there are people who are a lot smarter than I am who would know that, and I'm hopeful that we actually hear from them and not just see kind of the change.org petitions where people are asking for this, but just because there's a great need for people to want that to happen, I'm never sure if it it's actually a doable thing.
So, sorry, Terri, go ahead.
Well, the part of the piece of it that really confounds me or confuses me or scares me is that it seems like there are a lot of I don't know if it's lists out there or immigrants coming forward and saying, here's my name and here's my status. And it seems like such a place of vulnerability. And what kind of protection then is for these people who are really trying to come forward and create change, but at what seems like tremendous risk for themselves by being so public about who they are and what their status is.
I think one of the most important things to understand in all of this is that although there are many people in the immigrant justice movement, immigrant rights movement, who have been working on the DREAM Act since 2000, what brought about DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was the youth and young adults that were willing to say, I am undocumented and unafraid, that were willing to put themselves on the line. All of the work, you know, there was a lot of work that had gone into this prior, but there just wasn't political will. It wasn't until people put their bodies and their lives on the line and stood up and said, I am your neighbor. I'm the person you ask to watch your house while you're gone or take care of your dogs. I deliver your newspaper. You know, we get together and, you know, at family gatherings, you know, and, you know, I go to your children's school and this is who I am. And you're talking about kicking me out of the country. So it really has been all of the great leaps and bounds that we've seen in immigrant rights has come because of the immigrants themselves that have been doing this work. And it's one of those things that you always want to be, as much as possible, a co-conspirator in this so that we are protecting them and, you know, leveraging our privilege to provide any, you know, any buffer zone as possible. But really, when it comes down to it, you know, the people that have put themselves on the line are the ones that are making the changes. Our job is just to try and, you know, lay as much groundwork and provide a buffer zone when needed.
That's what I was going to ask. Are those dreamers then super vulnerable now because there's basically a registry of them? I mean, they blow my mind. Every time I'm afraid, I just think of them. They are the most amazingly courageous young people. So are they at particular, I've heard both they're not and they are at a special risk now.
So there's a chance of their being at risk because, of course, their information is in the system. What the government has said from the very beginning, back starting in 2012 when DACA was announced, is that it's not that we didn't know that these people were here. It's not that we didn't have the ability to track them down. We could have done it. They've just never been our priority. And we're doing DACA to provide this protection. Our hope, and I would say primary expectation, is that they're not going to use that list to try and, you know, use it as a registry and go round up people. And the reason why is because it's been an incredibly successful program. You know, Forbes just did an article about how much how much it increased the tax base by having, you know, people be able to work and actually, you know, work under their own Social Security number and pay into the Social Security and tax system. It's also been very popular with, you know, the colleges and higher education because, you know, people are doing what they wanted to be doing and should be doing. And so really having a positive impact on our communities. So I think that if we saw the administration and if we see ICE targeting those people who have DACA, I think that there's going to be a public uproar because I think that there's a lot of people even who are conservative who may have voted for the president-elect who would say, wait a minute, that's not what we were talking about. We're talking about, you know, these bad people that, you know, are really talking points and sound bites from talk radio and conservative news programs rather than, you know, realistic descriptions of people who are living in our country.
Since the election, has there been an increase from UU churches in wanting to get involved?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, it's been incredibly exciting, a little overwhelming, but incredibly exciting. The number of UU congregations that have reached out. We're incredibly lucky that we received a grant from the UU funding program that actually started in June. So we've been working on sanctuary and we have provided technical assistance and support and consulting to congregations really since 2008. Congregations interested in doing sanctuary. And we knew that there was going to be more and more need for this. And so we actually applied for a grant this last spring and, you know, have an opportunity to be able to provide these services and actually, you know, get funded to do so. I think our ideal goal was that we would work with 6 congregations, and right now we're juggling right about 14. And all but 2 of those have contacted us since the election. So there definitely is an understanding among Unitarian Universalists that something needs to be done. the great thing about the discernment process that we've created is that it helps congregations determine whether or not providing sanctuary is the right thing for them. Sanctuary is only one facet in a beautiful jewel of immigrant justice, right? There's many, many different things that congregations can be doing.
Can you say like 5 of them just to?
Sure, absolutely. Well, first off, there's providing physical sanctuary. Probably the next best thing is being a part of a sanctuary coalition and being a sanctuary support congregation to another congregation in your area that's providing sanctuary. There's also being a sanctuary advocate or an immigrant rights advocate. And I mentioned that a little bit earlier. That can be anything from working with your city council and your county board of supervisors to make sure that the rules and regulations that are passed are immigrant friendly, to work with your city to become a welcoming city and or a sanctuary city, to work against ICE involvement in local law enforcement. There's great ways of doing that type of advocacy work. There's also ways of doing things like opening up your congregation as a place, you know, a couple mornings a week where people can come to practice their English, to have coffee chat, cafecitos, and, you know, have coffee and practice their English so that they feel more comfortable living where they're living. There's many, many different ways of being involved. We have congregations that are doing refugee resettlement work. We have congregations that are providing support and services to new immigrants in the community, whether that's creating a resource book of saying, hey, these are some of our favorite doctors and dentists, you know, these are where the local health clinics are. If you're new to this area, you know, here's information that you can have. There's lots of different ways of doing it. It doesn't have to be just the one big thing.
That's really cool. I'm going to guess that's all on your website.
A lot of that is, and it's definitely one of those things that I'm like, we need to get some more information out there so that people know better ways of congregations know better ways of getting involved.
Yeah, because I think one of the things, sorry, Hank, I'll shut up next, but I think one of the things that that I've seen people realize is we could only help one family and then get like, but there are so many that need it. So you're, even for people who have the energy to do the one thing, help showing up at trials or going to the city and things like that can be done also. So that's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And one of the most important things is being involved in local sanctuary coalitions, pardon me, local sanctuary coalitions and working with immigrant-led organizations. Those are the places where people who need sanctuary are identified, right? We don't go out in the community and say, hey, does anyone need sanctuary? Because in order for someone to go into sanctuary, it's a very specific type of case. And there has to be a lot of supports around that, including a legal team in place and a support team. So that's when we partner with organizations like United We Dream and Endelon, you know, local branches of that like Puente or the day laborers organizations. And it's from those places that we hear of people who may be eligible for sanctuary. And again, we want to be working in partnership with those, in a covenanted partnership, meaning that we're willing to be the followers, that we don't need to go in as the experts and say, look at what we can do, but instead we're going in and saying, we are willing to leverage our privilege. How can we support you and how can we help protect members of our community? And going in with that humbleness and that open heart, that sense of empowerment of being willing to leverage your privilege, whether that's, you know, privilege of having the congregational space, privilege of education, privilege of finances, it's white privilege, it's cultural privilege. There's leveraging all of those privileges to provide protection is what you're looking for. So you definitely, you know, it's not the sort of thing where we're hoping that congregations see a webinar or participate in a workshop and then say, that's it, we're going to become a sanctuary congregation. It really is a process, and wanting to make sure that that everyone is on board, that you definitely have consensus, and of course that you have the partnerships in place, because like I said, sanctuary is one facet in the jewel of work that we do on immigrant justice, but it's also a long-term commitment. It's a long-term commitment, whether or not someone ever comes into sanctuary. It's part of the long game of organizing.
Mm-hmm.
So my question, Mike, I'm going to jump in there, Tom. Sorry.
What?
Is, I mean, I think it speaks to what you've just said. So that, you know, like the first thing a congregation should do is contact you rather than sort of like go out and, you know, try to find folks who need sanctuary. They should speak to you first. And then, but would you help them find somebody, like, you know, or would you just sort of say, like, here's some guidelines for you to go out and think about doing stuff? You know, the webinars, all the stuff that you're talking about, I was like, wow, this is great stuff. But like, sort of at what point, how do churches get involved, and what should they be doing first, and all that sort of stuff?
Well, the good news is, because of the amount of interest that we've had, our partners at UUSC and the UU College of Social Justice have come together and said, wow, UURISE, we know you're going to be inundated right now. What can we do to support you? And so I'm incredibly blessed to have the relationships that I do with my colleagues there. And we are in the process of creating a series of webinars. The first one will be on January 17th. And that will be for ministers. And then the next one is January 22nd, which is the Sunday after inauguration. And that is for all congregations, small group ministries, individuals, that will kind of introduce the idea of sanctuary and different ways of doing resistance. And then from there, in partnership with the UU College of Social Justice, we will be doing 2 very specific webinars on sanctuary. The first one is kind of the 101, if you're thinking about doing sanctuary, what do you need to do? And we talk through a lot of the same things that you're saying. You know, you don't go out and look for someone. What you do is you create the structure, and it's your partner organizations that are going to identify the person who comes in. And the goal of the webinar is to give congregations 3 to 5 steps that they will do prior to reaching out to UURISE, so that they kind of get the ball rolling to see whether or not there's actually interest to do this, and not just the 2 or 3 people who think that this is a great idea, but you know, no one else in the congregation does. So we can best utilize, you know, our resources and provide the most support. So by doing this webinar, we'll be able to have that up where people can access that. They can look at it in their small group ministry. They can look at developing a leadership team, look at some of the logistics and put that all together. And then there's the second webinar, which really gets into the discernment process. Okay, now that you think that you want to do this, this is the discernment process. How do you do this? So just a couple little highlights of the discernment process. It's really based around having cottage meetings, which are smaller than town hall, so that you really find out the fears and concerns of the congregation. But the people who are holding those cottage meetings are your leadership team, who would have already received training from UURISE at that point. So they're going in with a bunch of FAQs, frequently, you know, answers to frequently asked questions. They will already have information about the impact on their insurance company or the zoning issues, all of the general questions, so that you kind of take care of the big ticket issues, so you can really get to, you know, kind of what are coming up with people's concerns and issues. And then they come back to UURISE, the leaders come back to UURISE with those issues. We kind of work through them together. And then ideally it would go to a vote at a congregational meeting, so that the congregation is in consensus on it. So that's kind of a quick overview of what the discernment process is. But there's a number of steps that we are asking congregations to look at before they start the discernment process. So we know that we're not starting the discernment process with only 5% of the congregation that thinks this is a good idea.
Sounds to me like you're saying that congregations should be already moving toward larger participation in just immigrant justice organizing before they really start just going, looking at sanctuary. That looking at sanctuary is kind of like a very high level of commitment to immigrant justice organizing. And if you're not doing immigrant justice organizing out of your congregation, you should start thinking about that before you start saying, oh, let's get somebody living in our basement for, you know, a month. That's skipping steps and trying to go for the most, there's almost a glamour to that level of commitment that a lot of congregations are not, they just don't have the practice nor the relationships
Right.
in the community that's doing immigrant justice work and that's on the line with it. To jump ahead is, well, that's just, you know, I mean, it is an expression of our sense of entitlement and privilege if you think you can do that, you know.
One of the things that if you've heard me speak at general assemblies and on the VUU before, one of the things that you will hear me say quite often is that UUs are amazing at being boots on the ground, that we are willing to jump in and you tell us that work needs to be done and we will jump in and do it. But what we haven't always been good at is looking to see where we're going to land. And sometimes we land on top of people that have already been doing this work and are like, what the heck are you doing? You're on my back now. And so that's a big part of what we try to do is kind of, you know, bridge that and say, it's wonderful that you want to do this. There are already immigrant rights groups in your area. I know there are. And you may not know who they are, but UURISE may be able to help connect you with them because of the connections that we have, the national organizations that we're a part of. So how do we plug you in so that you can leverage your privilege instead of, you know, wield that privilege as a weapon? How do you leverage that privilege to support the work that they're doing? And you may get to this coalition and find out there's already four congregations that have voted to be a sanctuary congregation and they're just waiting for the right person. So now you're the fifth in line. That's great. If you're committed to immigrant justice, your response is going to be, that's fantastic. What else can we do? If you were looking for the limelight, your responsibility, your response is going to be, oh, well, we wanted to be the one that does it. We should be able to do this because we like our bright yellow shirts and we want to be in the, in front of the cameras. So, right, we work really hard with congregations, with individuals to make sure that we're doing engaged justice and doing covenanted justice, which means doing intentional work and being together in partnership and making sure that our boots are on the ground and not on someone else's back.
Great.
Katia, I've been asking what I call, to use Clarence Skinner's term, agitators for justice. I've been asking other agitators, what is it, right? I mean, because right now things are looking dark, you know? What is it that is giving you hope right now?
You know, what's giving me hope is the fact that the people that I work with, the people that we do our justice work with, the immigrants who are leading this call, are looking at me and saying, Katia, I understand that you're upset and sad, but we're not surprised by this. None of this is new to us. So go take your private time to be sad and then gear up and get in the fight. And it's the reminder that this election for me was devastating. And then I'm reminded that it's because of my privilege that it was devastating, right? For those people that didn't have the privilege that I have, many of them saw it coming. And if they didn't see it coming, many of them were like, well, I was hoping it was going to go the other way, but it's nothing new. It's not something that we haven't seen before. And so that's where I'm getting my inspiration, is the reminder that, together we're stronger by doing this work, that working with our immigrant partners, they're going to remind us it's okay to be sad, but buck up, gear up, get your boots on the ground, and let's go forward and let's do this work together. That's what we do. And it reminds me the importance of being in partnership, and that inspires me.
Partnership. Great. Well, thank you for being our partner today and coming on The VUU and giving us so much great information. And can we put your, let's see, so what is your website so that people can get more information?
Our website is www.uurise.org, UURISE.org. And on there, you can sign up for our newsletter, and we definitely will be sending out information about the UUSC webinars coming up on the 17th and on the 22nd, as well as the UU College of Social Justice webinars that we'll be doing on the 30th of January and the 27th of February.
And we'll
Right.
put all of these show notes, all this information in the show notes for the episode. So you'll have all of the links right there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I do just want to do another shout out to the UU funding program for the fact that we're able to do this work. We're thrilled to actually have some funding to do it. We did get a matching grant with them. So if people are interested in helping to do this work, whether or not your congregation is able to provide sanctuary, you certainly can support the work that we're doing, which is allowing other congregations to provide sanctuary. So there's many ways of being involved.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And Tom Shade, thanks for coming back and joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, y'all.
Bye, folks. Happy New Year.